Today is March 16th. It's the 75th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. It's taken me a little bit longer than I'd hoped to get you the second episode of On This Day Podcast 2.0, the new edition, and nope, we fired that guy. But here it is, and we'll have another episode in just a couple days, I promise you that. These episodes are going to be all new topics, or occasionally it might be a reprise of an entire episode, or it may be a deeper dive on a topic touched on previously, such as today's topic, the kidnapping of American citizens in Lebanon in the 1980s. In 1984, William Buckley is the CIA station chief in Beirut, Lebanon. After a career that takes him around the world, serving in Vietnam, Cambodia, Zaire, Egypt, and Pakistan, Buckley takes over as station chief in Beirut in 1983. At this point, the Lebanese Civil War has been going on for 8 years, since 1975. And the U.S. is in Lebanon as part of a multinational force tasked with restoring order and bringing an end to the conflict. In 1983, an Islamic fundamentalist organization called Islamic Jihad bombs the U.S. Embassy, and later that year, the U.S. Marine Corps barracks at the Beirut International Airport. Many of CIA's intelligence networks in Lebanon are disrupted as a result of the bombings, and Buckley has his work cut out for him to repair the damage. He knows it's dangerous in Beirut. That's obvious to anyone. And he knows he's on the enemy's hit list. Yet, he still goes about his daily routine. One morning, Bill Buckley leaves his apartment to head for work on his usual route. Right outside his Beirut apartment building, he's kidnapped. On this day in 1984, Bill Buckley is kidnapped by Hezbollah, a Shia Islamist militant group backed by Iran, with intimate connections to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Hezbollah is also Islamic Jihad. Buckley is the third American kidnapped in Lebanon in the 1980s. There will be another 64 Westerners kidnapped throughout the remainder of the decade. In early April, 3 weeks after Buckley's abduction, President Reagan signs National Security Directive 138, which lays out the broad strokes of a plan to combat terrorism and free the hostages, Buckley and the 2 other Americans held captive at that point. National Security Directive 138 is drafted by Reagan's National Security Council Deputy Director for Political Military Affairs, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. The plan outlined in Directive 138 is the initial blueprint for the covert activities that evolve into the Iran-Contra scandal. Exactly 1 year after Bill Buckley's kidnapping, on this day in 1985, American journalist Terry Anderson kisses his sleeping fiancée and slips out of their apartment. She's pregnant, and he doesn't want to rouse her from her slumber. He meets a friend for an early morning game of tennis. A green Mercedes with curtained windows drives slowly by as they leave the sports club, but they think nothing of it. Anderson drops off his tennis partner at his apartment, and the green Mercedes appears again. This time, they take notice. In an instant, men armed with 9mm jump out of the Mercedes, put a pistol to Anderson's head, force him out of his car and into the Mercedes, and speed away. Terry Anderson, kidnapped on this day in 1985, will be held captive for the next 2,454 days. Over the years, the hostages are moved between locations a number of times. For a while, Anderson is held at Iran's Revolutionary Guard barracks in Beirut. and other times in an apartment a few blocks from the Green Line, the main territorial dividing line in the heart of Beirut. The hostages are sometimes held alone, and sometimes in a small room with other hostages. Some of them, who are held in the same apartment as Bill Buckley, report that he's kept in isolation and is not doing well, possibly due to the gross mistreatment and torture he endures. Later in 1985, Hezbollah announces they have killed Buckley. But the truth is that William Buckley, kidnapped on this day in 1984, dies in captivity of a heart attack. In the U.S., it's not that the hostages have been forgotten, but a lot of the time they just aren't remembered. The Reagan administration's attempt to secure their release, the convoluted Arms for Hostages scheme, is a failure. The sale of weapons to Iran in exchange for the release of the Americans, with the proceeds from the arms sale being funneled to the Contra's militia group in Nicaragua, becomes public knowledge, known as the Iran-Contra affair. Running the program is Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, who drafted Directive 138, and National Security Advisor Vice Admiral John Poindexter. When the scandal comes to light, North and Poindexter are indicted on charges of conspiracy to defraud the U.S. on this day in 1988. All the while, hostages are still being held, and more are being abducted. The most visible hostage is Terry Anderson. His family does everything they can to gain his release, particularly his sister, Peggy Say, who isn't content to simply wrap yellow ribbons around the trees in their hometown of Batavia, New York. She relentlessly and tirelessly maintains awareness of her brother's plight and that of all the hostages. She meets with the President, the Secretary General of the UN. She meets Pope John Paul II, even Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Peggy Say will meet with anyone if it will help bring her younger brother home. When Terry Anderson is finally released in 1991, 7 years after being kidnapped on this day in 1985, he is the longest held captive during the Lebanon hostage crisis. He's the longest held American hostage in history, until Robert Levinson disappears in 2007 on Kish Island in Iran. There are 290 days left in the year.